y'all to the VRNation Station. We're diving deep into vacation rental sensations. From management tips to the latest creation, join us each week for some sparkle and conversation.
Look at it.
For sure. I think technology today, there's so many things now that quite frankly are just table stakes. Back in the day when I was a property manager, I'll tell you, here's a quick story as well. But we used to love to bring homeowners and the realtors to the office, and we would do a full-blown tour and introduce them to pretty much every module in our business, right? So who was the marketing director, the housekeeping director, everybody. And that was a huge impact because it personalized us. And we would tell stories. Our marketing director was a semi-professional bowler. He bowled 16 perfect games. And so we would tell these stories, and it was very memorable, if you would. But here's one quick thing we did. We turned the closet, this totally dark closet, no windows, and we set up some very big TVs that at the time were pretty cheap. Now today they're pennies. But what we did is we actually had GPS locators for all of our service trucks, and we would pull up, we were a LiveRes partner back in the day, and we'd pull up the LiveRes dashboard and we'd illustrate all this technology and just, all this whiz bang that we did, and it would just blow them away. It's a little different today.
Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the VRNation Station. For those who've been listening in the past, you know who I am. I'm your facilitator, Jamie Hansen. I do appreciate everybody joining. For all the new folks, hopefully you gain some information out of this. I know this episode for sure, you are going to learn a ton. So make sure you are focused a little bit if you can, and write some stuff down if you can. I have a special guest with me today, a good friend of mine, Brian Riggs. He works with Vintory. I've been a client of Vintory's in the past. Brian has helped me immensely with a lot of great information over the years. And so I'm very happy to introduce him. So Brian, maybe tell folks a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about Vintory, and then we can jump into what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jamie. Certainly appreciate it. Certainly the opportunity to be here as well. And thanks, VRNation. And frankly, I think today, the spirit of today is what kind of takeaways can we provide for folks? We've been in the industry. So we started Vintory back in 2019, and we're blessed. We've worked with over 950 companies, helping them grow inventory. And we just do one thing. We just focus on one thing, and that's owner recruitment, how to help you create brand awareness and reach out to homeowners to grow your inventory. Because you don't have an inventory, you don't have a business. I've been in this industry for over 10 years, here located in Orlando, Florida. Actually, Steve Schroeder was the one that started me in this industry, but I've had a real estate background and a technology background. I've always been in sales, so it always came together. And my business partner, my founder, and I'm co-founder of Vintory, Brooke Fouts, he recruited me. And the bottom line is that he said, I don't see anybody in our space that's doing this. And so voila, in 2019, we started Vintory. And timing's everything, right? Timing and a great team. So I'm really blessed with that. And so here we are. But I thought today, again, if you want to reach out to Vintory, you can reach me at brian@vintory.com for sure. But I thought, Jamie, today we could just talk about a couple of things that we're finding in our customer base, and then also all of the prospecting that we're doing with regards to what we're seeing with owner recruitment.
That'd be great. I mean, I think that, the most important thing I think our listeners really want to focus in on, especially on this topic, because if we're talking about differentiation, it's mission critical. And I suck at it myself. You keep explaining it. It's not that Cabino's not good at it, but how I explain it isn't the best. So sometimes it's really good for a property manager to hear the brutal truth of, you could say you're the best cleaner and you could say you're the best maintenance team, but there's got to be more to it than that. So why don't we jump right in and have that conversation? I think it's going to be good. I know that some of the differentiator points that you've talked about with me in the past, like specializing, type of service model, what kind of technology you're running, what kind of offerings do you have in comparison to market, and then obviously brand and reputation. Those are some of the pieces. But why don't we jump right in there and just say, first of all, why has differentiation become such a hot topic in just the short-term rental industry?
I think you can go back to a couple of things. Just number one, the growth in our industry and the barrier to entry is pretty low. So you're seeing so many more folks come in and manage properties, whether it be host that move to co-host, that move to a professional property manager. So 10, 15 years ago when I started, the industry was very fragmented. It was definitely dominated by mom and pops. You didn't see all of the acquisition and the mergers and so forth taking place. Today, it's a different ball game. You've got everything in your market. So I would imagine wherever you are, you've got probably a really big player, and then you have a ton of smaller players. So the thought is, where are you whenever you're speaking with these homeowners so that you're not just a me too? You have to really think about that. And what I would share with everybody would be before you start any marketing. If you call Vintory and you're interested in us doing a market analysis for you, we'll do that, right? So that's something, email me at brian@vintory.com. We'll do that. But before you do any of that, you need to understand what is unique about you. What is that differentiation that you do have? And how can we make that happen together? So that's the thought. Since you mentioned before, hey, write this down, let me just give a couple of table stakes if you do want to write a couple of things down. Number one is consistent pressure on the market. So when you start to grow or have a true goal to grow your inventory, you just need to have consistent pressure on the market. And that can be in two ways. That could be like a service like Vintory, where we'll source who the owner targets are, create different go-to-markets, things like that. But the other side of it is, and certainly something that I was accustomed to back working with Steve Trover, is your circle of influence. Jamie, I know you guys do an awesome job with this, but how you work with your realtors, your cleaners, your pool techs, everybody. Do they know you exist? What is unique about you? Are you staying in front of them? That was a huge part of my success when I was a property manager. And by the way, those are the cheapest leads you're going to get. That's just sweat equity. So when we start talking about cost per lead and things like that, if we get to that in this podcast, that's probably one of the most important things that you want to lay the foundation for. Do you know who the players are in your market, and are you in front of them, and what are you doing? I used to go, Jamie, you might have heard me tell this story, but every Friday I used to go and do presentations to any real estate brokerage that would have me. And the reason why I did Friday mornings is because breakfast was the cheapest thing that I could get. I didn't have a budget really. And so the thought was, as I bring in donuts or coffee, have little $5 gift cards, stand up, talk about our property management, give a couple of $5 gift cards. Here's the story. Those $5 gift cards, I bet I probably got 80 new homes from just those little things. But that was the beginning of it for sure. And then we started doing some more advanced marketing and what have you. But before we did that, we knew who we were. I mean, we understood clearly what was unique about us. So, and it could be, is it some sort of specialization? Are you luxury only? Are you hyper focused for, I'm local, if you would? Are you pet friendly? What's the thought there? When you're just starting off, you may not know some of those things. And so you're just going after maybe a certain neighborhood, and maybe that's your beginning niche that you go after or something like that. It's one thing to say it. It's another thing to be able to have proof to be able to put into some of your outbound so that you can show it. So.
Right. So that might be like local photography within the area, or maybe a well-known person or well-known location, like Joe's Bar, and everybody knows Joe's Bar. That's interesting. Yeah. That's very interesting way to look at it.
For sure. I think technology today, there's so many things now that quite frankly are just table stakes. Back in the day when I was a property manager, I'll tell you, here's a quick story as well. But we used to love to bring homeowners and the realtors to the office, and we would do a full-blown tour and introduce them to pretty much every module in our business, right? So who was the marketing director, the housekeeping director, everybody. And that was a huge impact because it personalized us. And we would tell stories. Our marketing director was a semi-professional bowler. He bowled 16 perfect games. And so we would tell these stories, and it was very memorable, if you would. But here's one quick thing we did. We turned the closet, this totally dark closet, no windows, and we set up some very big TVs that at the time were pretty cheap. Now today they're pennies. But what we did is we actually had GPS locators for all of our service trucks, and we would pull up, we were a LiveRes partner back in the day, and we'd pull up the LiveRes dashboard, and we'd illustrate all this technology and just, all this whiz bang that we did, and it would just blow them away. It's a little different today because everybody has that. They have revenue management, they have these different pieces. So, but you do need to illustrate those for sure. Don't let that be your differentiator because homeowners are looking for that all.
Interesting.
Other things to think about. Yeah, as you're thinking about that, maybe think about as well. I think if you're new, that was something that you mentioned at the onset. if you're new, or maybe you're between 1 to 20 properties or something along those lines, what is your brand awareness? So when we go back and start talking about your circle of influence, do the people know who you are? And any homeowners you have, are you working with them to ask them for referrals? And then remember, anytime you start to put the word out there, somebody's going to go online and they're going to look you up. Do you have any kind of presence online? Are you running any AdWords? Do you have reviews? I used to say
Social
we're not
media.
in the, yeah, exactly. I used to think, man, I'm not in the property management business. I'm in the review business, and how I can get those reviews to help warm up those leads and bring them to me. I think that that's something that, again, I would encourage everybody to really spend a lot of time on to create that and have a mechanism for that. If you get a 5-star review on Airbnb, you need to, if you have Google My Business or something like that set up, you need to immediately ask for that 5-star review on Google or places like that too.
And that makes sense. It's an interesting situation. I know that, facets of property management are always crazy, especially around awareness. And, you drown in the day to day, I think, as a property manager with reviews, right? Because you've got, and depending on how many platforms you're on, we're pretty large. So we're on,
Yeah.
35 platforms or whatever it might be. When we get reviews coming in, you have like an entire, almost like a full time position just managing reviews, just responding back and, following up. The Google review on your actual company, I think, is something that a lot of people might not focus on much. And that's, I think, what you're calling out, right? So when you're talking about homeowners, potential homeowners aren't looking at your Airbnb reviews. I mean, maybe I guess they could if they really wanted to, but that's such a convoluted trail. But the Google reviews certainly are going to play back on whether a homeowner, in fact, I do remember one homeowner, which is hilarious because, I mean, it could be, I think we're, 4.8 or something like that stars.
Hmm.
This guy
You are.
referenced one review and said, I just don't know if I'm comfortable with it. You're just like, what? What are you talking about? He's like, yeah. He's like, oh, no, this doesn't make me feel comfortable. I'm like, "Well, probably not a good fit then." But yeah,
Well,
it's
that's
funny.
good. They'll find the bad ones. Everybody knows, anybody listening on this call, and you've done it yourself. I'm sure I do it. You always look for the bad ones. My wife has a technique. She sees a bad review and everybody else is good. She'll then to see what else have they reviewed, and if they're all bad reviews from that one particular individual, she just throws it out. She goes, "Oh, that doesn't really count anyway." But when you're thinking about your business, folks don't know who you are, especially when you're just starting off or if you're just not a known commodity, right? So you have to think about, all right, well, what do we need to do to start to achieve that? And then set the right expectations. So if you hire Vintory or if you hire somebody to start doing marketing for you, they're just not going to just start rolling in. They're going to look, they might be interested, they might kick the tires, those early leads, Jamie, they might call just out of interest, but they may not be super hot. So there's a little bit longer of a sales cycle. But the more and more you invest in that brand awareness and get reviews and get the knowledge out there and people talking about you, and it can happen. It's not going to happen overnight, but you just have to stick with it. That sweat equity we talked about. It'll start to pay dividends. And then you start moving from just choosing your inventory to really owning your market. And what do you want to go after? And then you can start to really sharpen up your niche and what you want to find is
Right.
what we. So it's a process for sure.
So it does actually play into one question I have, and that's, what I've seen is a trend on, now this is more listing management.
Hmm.
And I've gone down this track with a couple of different guests where we've talked about, Cabino, right? Cabino is a brand, it's a logo. You go on Airbnb, VRBO, you'll see a logo. But in comparison to, like, Jamie and Melissa's property, right? And you've got a picture of the couple and a little story that they put the snippet in about and everything else. Is there any, back to the whole, you have a persona on the OTAs and then you have your property management business itself. How much do those need to be linked? I mean, in your eyes, as far as that's concerned, is it something of concern or is it just not that big a deal?
Well, I think it is a big deal. Unfortunately, it's not easy, right? Anybody that's in this industry, you got to love the industry because it is not an easy industry, but it's addictive. You couldn't drag me away from it. Probably the same with you. But the thought is again, I feel like we're in the review business, whether it be a guest stay, a guest review, or an owner, they do play hand in hand. And the thought is that reviews just as a whole are going to help you. So whether they are the guest review or an actual owner review, if I'm a homeowner and I'm shopping a property manager, I just want to see pretty much the ranking, the amount, and probably we'll go in there and take a look at a few of them if you would. And most of them are going to be guest reviews because that's the most frequent touch point that you're going to have. So you want to blend them together, not get so caught up in what kind of review it is. I'm just looking for reviews, especially when I'm starting off. And again, the easiest hack that I have for anybody is that if you get a 5-star review on Verbo or Airbnb and you have a Google My Business account, immediately send that link over to that guest, ask them to copy and paste it in there because now it really starts to explode your visibility. There's something else, and we can go down a deep rabbit hole with this, but the last time you were searching for something, Jamie, if you went to Google and started to search for something, people aren't necessarily using terms anymore. They're using conversations. So if you go to Google and you ask, hey, can you show me or tell me all of the top rated property managers or all the best property managers in this part of Idaho or outside of wherever, Yellowstone or something along those lines, it's going to go in and you're going to have on Google the the real estate that you're going to see on the page. A ton of it's going to be Gemini or whatever the AI bot is that's looking there to find those terms and to give it back in a conversation. And what AI is doing is that they are looking for third party confirmation. So in a sense, it's like a lazy look. So AI is trying to find these verified third parties that it can go and find reviews, pull that out and say, you asked for this, here it is. This is strong content. So double-edged good news here is if you start to get the reviews, not only does it help you with kind of your rankings and your visibility in Google, but also when people are looking for you, they see that. So it helps on a lot of fronts.
Got it. Yeah, because that was one of the questions I was going to ask too, like how AI is. Because you're just like, well, when's the last time you searched it on Google? I'm like,
Yeah.
think about it.
Right. It's different. I mean, I'm old enough to know where I used to put in terms, right? I get all of that. I think about my kids today and how they do search and what they're doing. And it's 100% just conversations that they're having,
Right.
right? So they're going in, they're asking phrases and different things that really are more like you and I having a conversation versus typing in, property management, vacation rentals, Boise, Idaho, right? That
Right.
still does exist, but now they're asking it. And therefore, all of these players are putting AI in front, and that's what they're looking for.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. I think it's, like I use Gemini. I have the app on my phone, right? And I just, and I also think it's kind of like the people who got into the whole Alexa. Like I never got into using Alexa, right? Like my wife will be talking. I'll be listening upstairs and I'll hear her talking all day long, and I'll be like, "Who are you talking to?" And she's like, "Oh, I just was putting a grocery list together, like using Alexa." I'm like,
Yeah.
well, the concept of being able to have a conversation with an inanimate object and having it record and think through what you're doing is actually like a really new twist, I think, on what's coming technology wise for sure.
Yeah. I think and that's just starting with brand awareness. And it helps to start to create the awareness. But the differentiator, if you would, comes down to, do you have a book of business of past guests? Yeah, most people do. What are you doing to market to them to help create additional stays, repeat stays, fill gaps? All those strategies need to be spoken about, right? How do we turn a 3-day stay into a 5-day stay? What are we doing to all of those past guests? How do we market to them? What does that look like? You can say it, but I'll tell you this, if there's an opportunity to show it when you're speaking with a homeowner, let me show you what we do and illustrate that. And then furthermore, if you have a testimonial or some sort of numbers that proves the point, that creates the trust. Because you can say whatever you like, true or not true. And certainly, but the homeowner is looking for where's that validation, that trust. So the more proof that you can file off, it's going to create that better bond and get you in a better position if that's actually a property or an owner you want to work with. So reviews do that without a doubt. And then showing some of those illustrations of, all right, well, here's our guest. Let me show you what we have in place. We have this sequence, this workflow. We have these triggers in place, all of those things. Those things will really bring those homeowners in close so that you can get good relations.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So just to reel back, I had a question on the pressure in the market. I think it's an interesting one, and I've always struggled a little bit with it, right? Because there's the too much, right, versus because we're in, our market. Our market's pretty relatively small. I mean, we're not in Florida.
Right.
We're not like
Right.
2,000 short-term rentals in a neighborhood, right? We may have 2,000 short-term rentals in all of eastern Idaho. And the question is like, how much is too much versus the right amount? Like, how do you gauge that? How do you know the prospect sentiment in regards to potentially wanting to come with you?
Yeah, certainly a couple of ways to look at it. There can definitely be marketing fatigue, right? We've seen that. So being smart about when you just think about your seasonality, right? And of course, when the calendar's full and when the calendar starts to not be full, I think it's just common sense of when you need to be marketing ahead of the curve before that. Do you need to be sending marketing, July 4th that week to try to get new owners? I'm not saying no. I think consistent marketing is always key, but messaging and what you're saying and what the approach is and what the offer is probably might want to be softer where you're a little bit more aggressive when you come into owner season, if you would. So changing just some slight things as far as what the ask is and what the call to action is key. But I think, Jamie, is it's again, there is, I guess, marketing fatigue for sure. We do see that, but I wouldn't worry about that at least until you're doing something for 24.
Gotcha.
So they need to
Gotcha.
know who you are. You just opened a business or you're new or you don't have the brand awareness. Think about it like this. The last time you and your wife ate, maybe the last time that you and your wife ate at a restaurant you never heard of or nobody had ever recommended it. It's probably rare.
So I think the last question that I had asked was just simply like market fatigue, right?
I'm going to be pretty bullish. You need to do at least 24 months of something before you're really worrying about that. But there is a thing called market fatigue for sure, marketing fatigue for sure. Is that kind of where you're going with it, or what were you
Well,
thinking?
I think the question is, so if you're a non-marketer, right?
Okay,
And I think a lot of us make mistakes in this way. It's actually funny. I'll tell you about my welding story as far as how you can really screw up a relationship with a homeowner with something irrelevant, like a billing practice, right? Like you could be the best property manager, you can deliver the best service and be the most friendly and the best customer service. And then you screw up something in that billing process and they're out, right? Like they're out. And it's a very fickle relationship. But regardless of that, it's that whole concept, this welding story that I was in was because I had this bad experience. I took a bucket in to go get it welded or something like that. And I just had this really bad experience. And I started thinking to myself, like, God, I'm thinking of it in the user shoes now. And I think what we do oftentimes is we do that where we say, if I'm a homeowner, I'm getting tired of this, man. I'm so tired of getting these flyers. I'm so tired of these emails. How do they get my email address? Why are they texting me? How do they get my phone number? And you're getting frustrated because you're not just getting your property owner stuff. The fatigue expands past it, right? So now all of a sudden it's like I've got, I gave blood. So now I've got the American Red Cross calling me 4 times a day. I've got, like stuff like you get buried and inundated with junk and you get this level of not wanting to get buried. But the reality is it's almost like you have to get past that and realize like you almost have to be the bigger pressure to actually get through, because you're not just competing against other property managers for a potential homeowner's attention span. You're now battling with everybody under the sun. How do you compete with a prospective homeowner's attention? I mean, you have way too many different forces reaching out, telemarketers, junk mail, junk texts now, which is a new thing that's driving me crazy. You have so many factors hitting prospective homeowners. How do you sift through it?
sure. Listen, marketing fatigue is a thing for sure. But a homeowner that has a vacation rental, I mean, they are going to be a target, and not only for prospective managers, but lots of other vendors, Lowe's, Wayfair, all of that stuff. They're gonna see it. The bottom line is consistency is the key because you're really betting on, hey, somebody might be ignoring whatever marketing you're doing. We like to call it omni-channel effect. So we're going to do direct mail, we're going to do digital, we're going to do email. There's other things that we can look to do as well. And we're going to time that out to where it's not just like every 30 days, like a drone. It was a little bit more here, a little bit less here, and there's kind of a mix of what you look to do. But the bottom line is that every 30 days when that owner statement comes out, there's an opportunity. And so being consistent and being a disruptor and staying at it, I would coach anybody, if you're going to do active marketing, give it 24 months. You need to set aside a budget, and we can certainly talk about that, but you need to have a budget and commit to it for 12 to 24 months before you really start worrying about, well, are we doing too much, or something along those lines? Are we turning away prospects by marketing too much? Early on, I don't think you need to worry about that. And that's what we found.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
You
You
know,
mentioned a word in there that I wanted to tap into a little bit more, Ryan, and it's
yeah,
something that you and I have talked about in the past: cost of acquisition. I think that we've had a lot of candid conversations about this because it's
well, yeah,
yeah,
man.
it's one of those things where it's like how to really define. I think that in Brooks' book, the 0 to 500, I think he does a really good job of laying out the formula around cost acquisition. And it's like, but I think there's more to the story. And I think you do a good job of explaining it. So maybe can you give a high level how costs of acquisition should be factored into some of these marketing decisions?
Sure. And of course, we're moving a little bit away from differentiation to
Right.
talking about budgeting and things of that nature. I think it starts with number one, starting to understand your numbers. It takes a little while to know your numbers, but to start to understand what are the things that we need to be paying attention to. And those can be everything from what's our typical sales cycle? Like, in other words, when we have an owner that reaches out, how long is it typically till we get them to sign? And then what's our onboarding process? And then when's typically their first booking? And then when do we really consider that property to be mature and to really start to drive, revenue for us? Guess what? That's time plus time plus time plus time. So there's just an associated carrying cost even right there, if you would, because a property manager is typically incurring a lot of those charges to do the listings, the photography, the paperwork, all those things to get a property just stood up and live for sure. So the good ones are able to shorten that as much as possible, but you're starting with that. So just understanding the realistic aspect of when that revenue is recognizable and how you're going to have to carry it. And that's where a budget comes into play. Other things come into play as far as, think about it like this. If you sign a property, and Jamie, it does on average $50,000 in gross booking revenue for the year, right? If you're charging 20% commission or 40% commission or whatever it may be, what we're really interested in is margins. What's going to be the money that is the revenue that you're seeing? And on average, you're going to get 10% or more of margin. So let's think about that. If a property does $50,000 first year in gross booking revenue, that means 10% of that, that's $5,000, right? First year revenue. That makes sense? So just some simple math there. The second thing to think about is not only the revenue each year, but the lifetime value of a property. So if you understand what your churn is, and that's basically a percentage. So if every year you're losing 10% of your properties due to they're sold or they leave or whatever it may be, the way you can simply do like a churn analysis is 1 divided by your churn percentage is effectively your churn. So it can give you your lifetime, if you would, of your property. Quick numbers. If your churn is 10%, 1 divided by 10%, that's 10 years. So the lifetime of that property in your program is going to be 10 years. Well, now I'm going to take my revenue each year. So $5,000 times 10, lifetime value of that property is $50,000. So there's a couple of ways to think about it. Your every year, your revenue that you're going to achieve, and then the lifetime value of that revenue. Typically, how long is that property going to stay with you, if you would? And then there's another scenario is just the valuation. So when you add a new property to your management program, that door, that contract, it's worth money, right? And you can ask Ben Edwards, Jacoby Dolan, all of those guys, rough and tough, $30,000 a contract, or maybe a little bit less, a little bit more. It's typically what we found to be the valuation for these contracts. So you just look at the value. If you add 10 new properties, if you would, to your portfolio, well, then 10 times 30,000, that's a $300,000 lift and just evaluation. Inventory is huge. It's the greatest ROI we see, but what what is your cost, your CAC to get that new inventory? And so you're trying to think, well, what are all of the mechanisms that I have in play? The cost of my sales team, the different things I have if I'm doing marketing. And so you have to understand kind of your cost, allocate what you're putting in for that, and understand that's where the budget comes in. So, all right, so our budget is X for this year. And then how many leads does that generate? Well, remember, you're going to have to, that's where you have to let it go for 12 months, 24 months, where you can start to really see it take off. But the thought is now when you look at the leads that come in, Jamie, not to get too much in math, but the thought is all right, I've got, let's say 50 leads. And out of those 50 leads, I'm able to get 30 of those into a good conversation, right? So they've qualified. I'm actually in a solid, you're speaking to them. I'm talking to 30 of those leads. What's your close ratio? And close ratios are going to vary. If a realtor walks in with somebody, it's probably going to be a super warm lead because they're recommending you. So your close ratio should be pretty tall on those. If it's just flat out cold marketing that you're speaking with somebody, they didn't know you and you're taking them through the sales cycle, your close rate, your close percentage is going to be a little bit lower on those for sure.
Right.
I guess my point is we ask the question all the time, what do you think your close ratio is? And if somebody says, oh, well, we close about 20% or 15%, or oh, I close 80%, like, okay, so we try to set those expectations to where when you're spending this money, you get this many leads and you're closing this many, and then applying that, the revenue that we talked about, lifetime value, first year earnings, all of those. And I've got all this, guys. If anybody wants to email me, I've got decks on all of this stuff that I can share, and it's on our website too at Vintory.com. But those are the ways that you can start to understand the numbers better. Listen, your cheapest lead is going to be that sweat equity we talked about at the very beginning.
Right.
Talking to your circle of influence and getting those folks to come to you. Some of your most expensive leads are going to be through just cold marketing. So,
right. Yeah. And I think it's interesting because I think through the financials of, and again, the cost of acquisition is, depending on industry, is always unique, right? Because, you think of your salesperson's time, and you think of close rates, lead funnels, how much, and again, if you're a smaller property manager out there, like, don't get intimidated by this. Like, this is Brian and I, waxing philosophical, I think, on larger scale growth. But, when you're a smaller company, the one thing you always want to keep in mind is what Brian's saying is absolutely true. You're always, your best leads are going to be referrals. They're going to be homeowner referrals, frankly, because you have the authority. My neighbor told me that they use Cabino because they're the best. That's hard to screw up, from a sales perspective. I mean, you can. I mean, I have for sure. But, it's hard to screw that up. When you start looking at, okay, I am, power spamming Joe Smith in this town, and Joe Smith's calling me to tell me to never email him again, right? Like, that's a significantly harder lead to close. But, when you think about it, if you're in that 1 to 10 range, or 1 trying to get to 10 range, that referral, burning the souls, right? Getting out there and making sure that you're foot by foot out in the street, introducing people, talking to your cleaners, paying your cleaners for referral fees, paying your maintenance people for referral fees, your other homeowners for referral fees. It's a no-brainer, because the cost of giving a 2% off of a potential, say you're at 30% for a commission rate, and saying, okay, for every referral you close, I'll knock off a percentage of your plan. That resonates with homeowners, because that's more money in their pocket, and it doesn't do anything for them other than say, hey, Joe, go and talk to Jamie about joining Cabino, right? They're doing a great job for me. But that cost is important to understand.
Best leads in the world are those owner ones, because one question we ask anybody that comes on board with us, how do you manage your owners right now? Are you offering your owners any kind of referral? And if the answer is no, the next thing is, well, why not? Can you do that by the end of today? Can you start that? There's timing with that. I mean, there's some obvious things here just with common sense. If you have a property that's underperforming and you have a everybody's got owners that are difficult. But that's just the way it is. You got great owners and some that require high touch or might be difficult. You just got to pick your battles with that. But certainly the owners that love you immediately reach out, ask them, "Hey, we're looking to grow. We love managing your property, like to get more like it. Can you start putting the word out? Do you want to give them incentives like you mentioned, Jamie? Whatever it is, you just got to make sure you're communicating that consistently." Again, another example of pressure on the market.
Right. No, that is a good call. One thing that always pops in my mind, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this. If I'm a homeowner in the area, right, and you're my property manager, like in my mind, I'm going, why would I want to bring in more properties to compete with mine under you, right? Like in my mind, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like if I'm smart as a business owner, I'm going, I'm one of 15 properties in my area. I'm only the only one renting. If I go and refer my neighbors, now all of a sudden I'm competing with these guys. So what's your thoughts on that? Is it a bad thing or is it a good thing to have that competition nearby and to have them with the same property manager?
Sure. I think the homeowner, again, knowing your homeowner, what persona they are, and maybe how they might take it is, again, something just common sense and knowing who to approach and who not to. But overall, if they're pulling for you and you're doing a good job, that's always the angle I used to take. Hey, we're doing a great job for you. We're expanding. It would mean a lot to us. And the best people would be, managing folks that that also have property management, also have vacation rentals or whatever it could be. So reaching out and putting it that way and really not because bottom line is that if you're doing a good job for them, they're not going to be that worried about, oh, all of a sudden the level of service is going to drop off. So again, it's knowing who the right owners are to reach out to and what your service level has been. We just haven't, quite frankly, me firsthand as a property manager and then here with Vintory for all these years, we just haven't seen that to be that big of a barrier. We get it a lot, but in reality, we just don't see it pop up that much. So
Right. Right. Okay.
I would
No, that
ask.
makes sense. And again, it's one of those where this is another jump topic, right? Because I'm thinking about communication, right? When you talk about owner communication, because you had brought that up and said, well, if we're talking about owner communication and trust factors, especially, just feeding back off of like pricing and yeah, I mean, I run into so many conversations where, when I talk gross versus net, I think,
Mhm.
you know, who do people actually talk net with owners or do they only talk gross? Because if you're talking net and all your competitors are talking gross, it can really confuse prospects in regards to that that closability. What do you mean I'm only going to get 30 grand? Your competitors are all saying I'm going to get 50. And it's like, well, are they saying
Sure.
gross or net? I don't know. And it's like, whether you even get down the path that. So, is it all gross? Is it let them be
No,
the
it's both. I think it's both, but it comes down to so the most important thing that you always need to drill down to, and I would coach homeowners on this as well. If you're shopping me, just make sure you're asking gross net. You're most interested in what you're going to see now, because that's the money. You can't spend the gross. You can only spend the net as far as what you see. Let me show you the path of how we do this, because quite frankly, when we were property manager, when I was working with Steve Trover, we were the most expensive in town by many points, many, many points. So I always had that we weren't a race to the bottom by any means, but we were super high touch, full service, top to bottom, if you would. And we didn't nickel and dime. So many of the things that we would do would be included, and we would share that scenario. So there was value in that, and we just had to stand behind it. And guess what? The homeowner's going to say three things: yes, no, or maybe. And at the end of the day, if they said no, then quite frankly, maybe it wasn't the right fit. Now, if we're getting no's and no's and no's, then we got to look at the pitch. We got to understand that maybe we're presenting it incorrectly. So you're always A B testing what you're doing and want to look at those results. But you need to know who you are and understand that, yes, you're talking to that homeowner about, okay, there's a gross. Okay, here's the booking amount. And then at the bottom line, this is what this is going to look like. And we're here to protect both of those things and do it every way we can to maximize all sides. This has to be a win-win, right? We're working for you. We love your property. We're taking care of your property. We're doing all this communication for you. And we're looking to get the bookings and the right bookings. And then you're doing your role of working with us, keeping the standards up, making sure the property, if we need refurnishings or things like that, you're keeping it up to standard as we like. So it's
Right.
just those real frank conversations where you're setting right expectations over and over again. So are very important. But to answer your question, long-winded way was we always talked both, and I always tell our partners, make sure you talk both. But of course, the most important is what's going to be in their bank account.
Right. Yeah, it's always funny because it's one of those where I find myself getting down the path in a sales path and in that conversation, especially about money. And it's like the one thing that I always feel weakest about is my competition. We seem to have, I mean, it can't be any different anywhere else in the country. It's got to be the same, right? There's always going to be some new guy. There's always going to be some fly by night that comes in and they're throwing down 10%, right? 10% offers because they think that, Evolve does 10 or, 15% commission. And so therefore that's what I'm going to offer. And you're just like, dude, your models are so different. You
Right.
don't understand the differentiation between your property management business. Like you're really going to swing and miss. But the long story short, like a lot of times I get down to the path of, service offering and price of service offering, and it just kind of chokes out there. And, it's not, I don't, doesn't mean that they just said no. It just means that a lot of them are like, yeah, I don't, that didn't factor into my financials. And, you get all the way down this pipeline, this funnel. And by the time you realize like they didn't understand what the cost of property management is, and it doesn't work out for their numbers. And so they're just like, I
Right.
can't do it because I can't work those numbers.
Well, let's go back to just making sure let's go back to a differentiator. So your unique selling proposition. And if you are a full service management company and then you're competing against a discount brand that's just looking to do bookings or something along those lines. So what's most important to that homeowner? What's the right fit? Let me tell you what the right fit is for our company. We're full service management. We control the rates, we control the calendar. We're going to talk about owner bookings and what's best for that. But that's the best way to maximize not only the use of your property when in time you are interested in using it, but also if your goal is to offset some debt or, from the financial side, what that looks like. And it's not a case of, you hear Tim Cafferty talk about this all the time is it's not about, if something goes wrong, it's when something goes wrong. And if you're on a discount brand, well, what happens? Do you understand what the path of the next way is to remedy that? Because those are things that we take care of to give you that peace of mind. So anyway, it's just how you justify whatever you're choosing to charge and making sure you understand it and you're very sound in it. And can exceptions be made? Sure, especially, early on, but I just be careful with that. Don't make exceptions all over the board because then you're really chasing your tail. You really need to set some guidelines of if you're charging this and maybe somebody's asking for a little bit of an extra deal, okay, well, you're going to adjust the numbers here and there. We did that for sure, especially if it was an amazing property, a 12 bedroom, 14 bath, amazing home in Reunion Resort, something like that here in Orlando. Yeah, that was a hot property. So sometimes we had to make concessions for that. But at the end of the day, it was still a win-win. So I guess what I'm driving at there is just know what your offering is, know what the differentiations are, and stand behind it and justify your cost. And again, they're going to say three things, yes, no, or maybe. And that's, it kind of hopefully gives you peace of mind when you're going into it. So you're
Gotcha.
not chasing everything. Yeah.
No, that makes
So
sense. So I promised I was going to keep you all Friday. So I'm gonna ask you one last question, and it's super short.
please coin this discussion as a long winding discussion because we started here and we ended up here. And
That's all
even
right.
before we went on the air, you're talking about my shirt and all. I mean, so we're everywhere here, which is great. I appreciate it. It's funny. So everybody listening, just so you know, I had a whole thing that I wanted to cover. We've covered this much of it. It's gone. Maybe I'll be invited back. I don't know, but
You're definitely. It's always an open invite anyway, right? Because at least you'll eat that, right? I mean, because everybody gets talked in circles. Because I can't help but ask just one little question, and then that little question ends up taking you down a bunny trail.
do you mind me asking you a couple of questions?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Go
this
right
doesn't
ahead.
put the beating spot or anything like that. But let's go back to the original topic about the differentiation, like owner perks. Okay, and you don't get specifics or anything, but are there any owner perks that you offer? And I'll give you an example. Like we've had partners of ours that'll offer their owners membership to a third home or different types of home swapping scenarios or things like that. Those are huge. It's difficult to convey in a like a direct mail piece all the time, but when you're speaking with a homeowner saying, well, let me share with you about our owner program, our owner loyalty program, or things like that. We don't hear that as much as I think we should. And I didn't know if you guys did anything like that at Cabino.
So it's an interesting discussion point. We went down that path
Okay.
and we tried to do the trading property situation.
Yeah.
What we ran into is that it was tough. Now, mind you, this was all just right before COVID hit. So it's like
Sure.
it's hard to gauge whether it was the program that didn't work or whether it was just the timing. But we have a pretty diverse portfolio. So, when you
Right.
have a 5-bedroom, $1.5 million house and you want to trade or you want to go through and trade credit to somebody who maybe they've got a 3-bedroom, $500,000 house, and you're just like, well, is that really a fair 1C trade out, right? So it just
Sure.
boils down to, I think, being able to execute it correctly is a
Yeah.
barrier for a lot of people to do it, because ultimately it's like it's really attractive for people who are on the lower end, but it's not probably very attractive to those at the top end, is what we ran.
Sure. And there's some third party vendors out there that offer services like that. And again, they have standards. So not every home qualifies by any means. So
Right.
it could be a case of like your top end properties probably might be more a fit for some things like that for sure. So yeah. Well, yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but yeah, I
Oh,
was
you're
just
good. No,
curious.
these are good questions because a lot of times it's a good challenge. I haven't thought about it in a while, and it's one of those where, as we go through a lot of our marketing, I mean, differentiating, right? So when I think of things like Cabino and what we do to differentiate from a homeowner perspective, we have partners. So we do a vendor partnership with Scouted as an example. So when we do, if a guest stays, say Brian, you're one of our homeowners, and a guest stays at your property and they go and they book whitewater rafting trips, just out of, actually it'd be more Yellowstone because we're in Yellowstone area. So say they go book
Okay.
Yellowstone tours. So we get a commission, Camino gets a commission off of whatever guests go and participate in these excursions.
It's
We
great.
then push that back to the homeowner. So we give an actual kickback to our homeowners that say, hey, you'll get 2% of, 2% of the commissions of anybody who's staying at your property that goes and does these excursions. It's not a huge
Okay.
amount of money, but it's something, right? Like it might pay for snow removal that year. It might pay for something. And to be honest, it's kind of like, because we are a custodial account that we use for each of our homeowners, that any revenues coming in. So if all of a sudden we can show a revenue line that says, hey, you got commission off of this, and it
Hmm.
dumped into the pot, that now all of a sudden they're not paying out for some expense. This maintenance expense was covered by this revenue. Like those are just, one example of how we use, an experiential marketplace to provide differentiation for homeowners.
Hotels. So what's the way to tastefully do it? And so excursion, revenue or EV charging revenue or, all sorts of scenarios that are out there. What about, okay, you didn't know I was going to ask this one, so I might as well get you with this one. So here it comes. Do you secret shop? Anybody? Do you ever secret shop?
It's a great question. I personally do not. I have not. I shouldn't say that. I have. I mean, it's one of those where it's kind of tough, right? So if I go out and secret shop, what I find is interesting in my area, right? So
Hmm.
depending on my competitor, I might just get shot straight down. Like the response rates are so bad sometimes that I'm like, how are they getting business? I don't understand this, right? Because they're not even answering their phones. But I haven't had a lot of luck in it. And let's just put it that way. I've done it, but it's not something that I do on a regular.
Well, I'm not necessarily advocating do it on a regular basis. A couple of things. We secret shop like crazy here at Vintory. We're not secret shopping like other vendors. We're secret shopping property managers a ton. And yours truly does this a lot as well. So set up different accounts, make different calls, try to look at response times. Are they picking up the phone? What kind of information are they giving me? I'm not asking for like full blown performas or rental analysis or anything like that. I'm just more curious about just the path of the sale and the responsiveness. And if you want to talk about differentiating yourself, create a system to where when somebody calls, you're getting that call. You're at the least, you're getting that call or you're getting something back to them in minutes. So I know that's a tough task, but make sure you're doing that. And then, just be thoughtful about it. Even if you're with somebody else and you have a call come in and you have it programmed or what have you, oh, this is a lead line or something along those lines. Even if you pick up the phone and say, listen, oh, my name's Brian. Thanks so much for reaching out. I'm actually in a home right now. May I call you back in 15 minutes or something like that? And for heaven's sakes, please call them back. But just those little things, because what'll happen is somebody will come to your website and they'll take a look. Maybe they'll fill out a form field. Maybe they'll send an email. Maybe they'll call the phone number on the website and they get your front desk, right? Or something like that, or some phone tree. So there's just so many places, points of failure with that these homeowners, they're probably going to call a couple of companies, if they are shopping around. And so typically the one that's the first responder is going to have the quickest, the best bite of the apple, if you would.
Right.
So that's another way just to easily differentiate yourself, is how responsive you are on that. And then I think another part about the secret shopping is just knowing your market. Who are the big competitors out there? What's typically what they're doing? Do they have a risk reversal? Do they offer, okay, we have 1-year contracts and that's it, or 2-year contracts, or no, we have no long-term contracts, stuff along those lines. Now, we do that at Vintory. So if anybody's interested in that and they want me to run a market analysis, we can do that. You can just email me at brian@vintory.com. And anyway, I can set up the call. We can go through and do all of that. But knowing your market and the competition in your market, so that then what are my speaking points? What do I need to say? We're not talking about somebody else. It's just, how do you slide in and now be unique in all this other things that are taking place? And that's huge. And that is daunting. And so we've been able to put a lot of effort towards that, and we can certainly help on that front.
Interesting. So if you're going to secret shop an area, like, do you just focus on the top 3? Do you focus on, how much energy do you put in?
Well, I'm blessed. I have an amazing team, and I have a curious team, and we have a ton of AI. So with all of that said, we're able to really tech enable a lot of things that we do. So, but we'll go in and we'll take a pretty good hit at an area as far as like the secret shopping scenario. Now, as far as the market analysis, we can do some extraordinarily deep dive stuff to uncover a lot of things, if you would. But yeah, it's a case of, sure, we're going to take the top dogs and see what they're doing right and how responsive they are. And then we'll also look for other players in the market as well. So, and I love it. It's one of my favorite parts of, working with our customers, but then also doing secret shopping, because just learn so much by doing that. So,
oh, that's an excellent point. All right, hit me with another question. Let's keep it rolling.
Well, I think Adam might be calling me any minute now if I keep asking.
Spill the beans, Brian.
Yeah. So I just thank you so much for having me. Like, truly, I do appreciate it. When I got the call, I was like, oh, this is great. And then obviously when I found out it was you, Jamie, I was excited. So really do appreciate the opportunity. So.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate you spending the time with me. I know, Friday afternoon, you got a lot of things going on. So I wish you the best, buddy. We'll see you soon, hopefully. I'm not sure which my next, have a beer and figure out our next podcast topic.
Heck yeah. Thanks, Jamie. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And to everybody out there, again, thanks to Brian Rinks for joining me today. I know that he and I, we can just chat. He and I could talk for hours. We have, and we probably will again for sure. But if you enjoyed today's content, please, brian@vintory.com. If you have any of the questions, I know Josh is going to put some of the links that Brian was referring to into the subject of the podcast itself. If you have any feedback, or if you want to know anything else or another podcast topic you'd like to hear, please throw it in the comments. Let us know. Otherwise, thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you next week.
See you, everybody.
Welcome y'all to the VRNation Station. We're diving deep into vacation rental sensations. From management tips to the latest creation, join us each week for some sparkle and conversation. VRNation Station, tune in and feel the thrill.